So I've been asked to look and talk to you a little bit about the process a large organisation like ours, I suppose, is going through to prepare for GDPR and learning from this. Actually, the title of the agenda was what a large organisation has gone through, but actually we're going through it. So I changed it to make it a bit more relevant for what we're actually doing today. So there's a few bits that we're going to talk about. I've got slides. You're very welcome to have them at the end. So please don't feel that you've got to scribble as I'm talking. And obviously, if you want to ask me anything as we're going along, it's absolutely fine. So first of all, a little bit about us. I'm sure you're aware. I think the key here is that we do vehicle leasing to customers of all sizes. So we're very much in there with the concerns around consumer data, individuals' data, as well as looking at small businesses, large international corporates, and also our supply network. So we work very closely with a number of very, very key suppliers across our industry. A little bit more about the overall international element, which will come into a little bit more focus as I move through the presentation. You can see we're in a number of countries around the world. Specifically, really, in the European market, we've got around now over 1 million vehicles leased within our sector. We've got a heck of a lot of employees. Within the UK, probably more pertinently to what we're talking about today, you can see we're around 700 employees. We've got 3 offices across the UK, Swindon being HQ, Birmingham, Manchester. We're regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority for consumer credit, consumer hire and some insurance activities. And we have around, I think at the last count, around 160,000 vehicles leased across all of that customer base. So that's about us. Ready for GDPR compliance, question mark. You know all of this. This has been talked about this morning. I think what we're finding is, as you are, that we've got a large number of key points that we're going to need to think about and get addressed, that we're putting that in the scope of it being the biggest change that everybody, any company, regardless of industry, has seen since 1995. From our perspective, I suppose, how we're looking at it, the concerns we've got, obviously, on the financial sanction side, everybody's kind of aware there's a big stick that could be used to beat us coming forth. Regulatory sanction, we're regulated, we've got our relationships with our regulator. Reputational risk, we want to make sure that we're providing a service that doesn't get plastered all over the Daily Mail or the Mail Online. We don't want to be that company. And it's about trust, yeah? It's about how we make sure that we're communicating with our customers and that they're aware, not just customers, but suppliers, any other part of the people that we do business with, that we are a trustworthy company and that we treat people's information seriously. And we want that message really to come across. We also know, I think, really, that as consumers, we're getting more savvy about information that businesses hold about us. And, you know, it's only been very recently in the press, we've seen terrible stories about the issues that BA have faced. We've seen the concerns that, obviously, for the NHS hacking. So, you know, this has kind of come at a time where I think we're seeing a kind of, you know, a sort of maelstrom of information coming at us and concerns are being raised. Obviously, everybody needs to implement it. The last point, Brexit, question mark. I've had quite a lot of questions. Well, if we're Brexiting, does that mean we can just do away with this? It says European. I'm afraid not. I think that's probably a message that you've probably heard elsewhere, but unfortunately, we seem to be in it until the government tell us otherwise. So on that note, I've tried to do this in stages. So these are our 6 stages, really, to our compliance project. First one, laying the foundations. So, you know, I suppose it's been around a year or so. We're all aware of it. We're all trying to get to grips with what it is and how it affects us. But I suppose these are the key steps that I took quite early on to try and just raise awareness within the organisation and to try and get some senior level buy-in, because I think, as has been said sort of previously, it was sort of, I'm not doing this, I don't want to do that. So we had to work very quickly, I think, to make sure that our senior management in the UK, also in Europe and also within the bank, were aware of the way in which this could impact across the business and also across our IT systems. So obviously through that we reviewed the guidance, we identified the priority areas, We looked at resourcing and budget at a general level, and we looked to hold some kick-off meetings. So I suppose from my perspective, that piece has started and pretty much has been concluded. And I know for other people that might or might not be the case, but that's certainly the first step we took. Second step, this is the one we're in at the moment, along with the third. So this is the piece that Jan referred to this morning, taking stock and trying to understand what it is that you actually hold. We're doing it through a data audit. What does that mean? It means that we've put a big questionnaire together. We've sent that to all of the different parts of our business who are processing information and working with either front-facing with our customers or working in our procurement or our supply chain activities. And we've asked them to fill it in and send it back to us. And from that, we're doing some detailed interviews with the people that are participating in that to make sure that we can pull out all the information about, you know, where pieces of paper are stored, how we go about our IT systems talking to one another, for example. So I think at the same time, we're looking at what we do currently. Is it compliant? Is it fit for purpose? Does it actually work from a Data Protection Act perspective? And we're looking at our current compliance and procedures around that. And I think at the same point, it's also interesting to ask the question, well, why are we doing that? So, you know, an example that we see is, well, you know, we've kind of always done it like that. And this is how we've kind of grown as a business. We started in the corporate space, we're moving into the consumer space. With that comes, I think, more concern around how you treat customer data. And I think that perhaps just a question around, well, why, does actually start a conversation that you can start to use going forward. So I think probably from there, I would suggest, as we are, you actually then pause and try and take stock of everything that you've got and try and work out how best to then start that next stage. And that really comes in at number 3. And that's really a question of review and assessment. And you may find that this isn't something that you can do on your own. We can't. We haven't got the expertise internally to be able to handle a really large project like this. So we're using an external third party to help us, 1, with the assessment and 2, with the reviewing, so that we know that at the end of that period here, that we can perform our gap analysis, which is underway, to identify what we need to do with certainty that we've actually picked up everything we need to at the outset. And then, of course, from there, we can think about how we need to change and what we need to do to build on what we've got already, and also to create this compliance roadmap, which I'm sure you've heard about and are aware of. And that's really the stage that we're in at the moment. So, as the sort of, well, what next? These are the bits you've got to tackle in order to be compliant. And obviously, I think there's probably people at different stages, but certainly in terms of implementation, we're looking to probably start to implement all of this work that we've been trying to do, hopefully by sort of September, October, with a view to trying to put in what we need to from a budget perspective, because obviously a lot of this is going to be IT systems, development, change, configuration, difficulties, to try and do that so that we can meet the deadline. We know that there are going to be areas that may be identified as lower risk. And I think the message that I seem to be getting from some of the legal advisors that we've been talking to is that you've got to go through the assessment in order to work out what those low risk areas are going to be. And then you've got to take a decision as a business as to whether you think that those are going to be areas that you can, for whatever reason, put as a finishing touch, i.e. after the end of May, or whether there's ones that are just, they're so important that they have to fit in prior to that. And I think that goes to the point that was being made earlier about trying to document all of this activity in whatever way you choose. But for us, it'll be through the compliance roadmap that I mentioned on the slide before. And then, of course, as a sort of final step, really, this probably goes more to the sort of compliance angle, but really just to make sure that you're monitoring and ongoing maintenance, really, of the way in which you've put your project into play. Moving on. So I mentioned it's the international side is important to us. We've got kind of 2 projects running slightly at the moment. We've got a very central-led project that's come out of our European operation, where we're getting a kind of top-down approach to trying to feed in information so that they can take a view across all of the different systems that impact across those various countries that we operate in, and try and put a view in so that we know budget-wise what we're needing to change and how we needed to change it. At the same time, the UK, because we didn't want to be sort of playing catch-up, we've started our own internal audit and working towards the gap analysis. And what we've prepared, and I don't know if this is something that you're looking at as well, but we've prepared a kind of red, amber, green status. We've looked across all of the different articles and we've worked out which the key ones are that we think are going to get to us, that either we can deal with easily, green, great, or ones where we think that we've got issues. And just as a kind of balance, we've got a little bit of green, we've got a heck of a lot of amber, and we've got a few red. And that's kind of where things are going at the moment. It's factors for success. I think it's fairly clear. It's kind of any factor for any successful project, really. I would say having a strong communication plan so that you can actually get buy-in from the people that matter and the people that hold the purse strings, the people that are able to do the IT piece within your business, because they're going to be tied up on all sorts of other things that they don't want to think about this in. And also to try and get as much guidance as you can from external sources. We're lucky we've got the bank that can help us to some extent. We've got people that we're using, as I mentioned, externally as well. But all of that really needs to be controlled through a kind of project manager and support, as you'd expect. These are the things that we're having to grapple with. They're ones that you've heard today, so I'm not going to go through them in any more detail, other than to say, really, that I suppose on my side, coming from the legal point of view, the work around the contracts that need to be changed, the work that we need to do with our customers and our suppliers, the work to try and future-proof what we're doing at the moment are all key areas of interest. We, as lawyers, I suppose, what we've got to try and do is get into the kind of nuts and bolts of the business and actually understand, you know, why, if something comes into one side of our business, it goes out in a different way over there. And just trying to connect those dots, really, is, I think, what this is all about. So I think those, really, we've talked about previously. What I would say on the last bullet point, on the data protection by design, what this is trying to get at, I think, is when you're thinking about new products, new services, new ideas, that you have that "what about data protection" little thing on your shoulder, and you can use that and say, how can I design this product in a way that will make sure that I'm compliant with what's coming up? And I know that's easier said than done, but if you don't, you're going to get into all sorts of trouble, I think, because you're going to find that you're going to be in a position where you've designed a product, it's live, you've got customers using it, and then you find that actually it's not compliant. And then, you know, depending on your status, you're into a pile of mess you probably don't want to be in, really. So this is for our side. I imagine it's probably similar for some of the people that are here today. Concerns we've got, really, I suppose, are around what we do on credit assessments, the information we take, what we do with it. It fits into our KYC, AML, anti-fraud and due diligence work that we're doing, making sure that we know what we're taking in, what we're using it for, and whether or not we actually do need to have it, how long we hold it for, and how we get rid of it in the most compliant way. I mentioned it earlier, procurement. Our contracts and relationships with suppliers are obviously absolutely key. We want to make sure we're doing that right. We want to make sure that our suppliers are engaged and understanding of what needs to be done. Sales, obviously very important as well, keeping our relationship with our customers. Intermediary channels, again, broker-dealers, extremely important to the way that our business operates, and we want to make sure almost fits into the supplier's point as well. HR, Jan referred to it earlier. Don't overlook this. I think I did, actually, at the outset. I tried to sort of exclude it. And actually it's key, because it's all about how you, as a business, take information from your employees and what you do with it, and whether you've got the right consents to actually use what are probably quite sensitive information, and tips you into that obviously that other category of sensitive personal data. So don't overlook it and don't underestimate it. I think it would be my personal experience. Driver details and consents are very important, and again, perhaps not one to overlook. You know, corporate customers have the relationship with Arval, but the drivers are the individuals that are on the phone all the time, and they're the ones that are saying, I've got a problem, and here are all my personal details. You know, and it can be absolutely anything. We can be told all sorts of confidential, private, personal information, and it's what we do with it. What do we do with it? What should we do with it? What should we be training our staff to be saying and doing about it? IT systems, obviously, extremely important. This is how all of these bits of the new legislation kind of fit in together, really. And you know, IT systems have been designed over time. They've been designed for different purposes. Some bits speak to another, some bits don't. What I think this is getting at is trying to make sure that you've got a very, very clear outline, however you're going to do that, of the way that your IT systems operate, and the way that information is stored and what happens to it when it's within your control. Digital initiatives, extremely important for Arval. We've got some telematics solution that we're developing. All of that has got to be compliant with the new rules as well as the old rules. And we've also got, as an industry, we've got the connected car issue, which we have some control over, but obviously there's a lot happening within the wider manufacturing space. So that's one to watch, and I think that might be something that Jay picks up on a bit later. And I mentioned the final one, really, product development, privacy by design. So think about privacy at all stages of your product development. So these are some of the things that we're looking at now. Slightly biased because I'm a lawyer and I'm sort of a bit sad and I like to think about contracts, but those are key. So we're looking at our data processing clauses within our third-party contracts. We're looking to see how we can, what we've got, whether it's fit for purpose, how it needs to change, how we need to start that conversation that we're going to need to have with each of our suppliers and our intermediaries. Obviously, that's probably a project in itself. So we've got to handle that very carefully. Intragroup contracts. So, you know, it's not just about the contracts you have with your third parties. It's also, if you're part of a wider organisation, what do you do with the, if you're taking data from, you know, subsidiary companies or companies that are based outside of the UK? I'm looking at updating template contracts, trying to future-proof. So I think one of the things that's been discussed previously was, you know, we don't know what we don't know, but actually there is some work that can be done now to try and get your data, if you're a data processor, to try and get your data processing clauses up to scratch. And that you can share those and actually start that dialogue. Implementation of new policies. I mean, this is massive, really, I think, in terms of the amount of detail that we're having to look through. And who's going to be doing it? Who's responsible for it? Does it all sit within compliance? Can we just say, it's not legal, it's compliance? Can we just say, actually, you know, I think it's more than that. I think it's that you've got to have you know, your procurement team involved. You've got to have your senior level sponsorship. IT systems, I've talked about that. And then just try to think about, when you're looking at the data that's coming in, try to find ways of being able to minimise that information. So ask the question, why are you doing it? Do we need to do it? What's it giving us? What's it doing to the customers? Is it something we actually need to hold? And in that way, you might not find that you can try and reduce your exposure down a little bit. So I suppose, final slide, we know there's a lot to do. That's why we're all here. That's why we've taken time out of our schedules to come and try and get as much as we can out of this session. We also know that data security is a major concern for all of our customers. You know, we see it every day. We have questions asked of us from our corporate customers, from our consumer customers. How are you doing this? What processes have you got in place? Demonstrate this to us. And I suppose, just as a final thought, really, what we're trying to do is, I suppose, try to put a positive spin on it from our side, from the legal side. What it's trying to, I think, get at the end of the day, after all the big stick and the fact that, you know, there could be terrible sanctions against us, it is trying to get to ongoing customer confidence within the EU as a whole, but also within our industry, within our business, and trying to get some customer trust in how we manage that data. So to do that, obviously there's accountability issues and demonstrating the compliance, and we've obviously been through the process of kind of how we're trying to get to that stage. And then finally, you know, working effectively with our entire third-party network and people that have any type of dealing with us, because we're all going through it in our different ways, and actually, in order to be compliant, we're reliant on the others within our industry to make sure that they're compliant too. So, you know, we could try and do that in various ways. I think our approach is we want to have an open dialogue. We want to be able to say, this is in our common interest, and these are the steps that we're going to need to take together. So that's it really, in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kate. No, that's really, really insightful. And I'm always mindful, you know, when you're in front of competitors in the room, it just goes to show the strength of BVRLA members, where I think we see this as a non-competitive issue. We're all in it together, and I think you're really appreciative of your time and sharing your insights. So really, really helpful. Any questions from the floor? Very polite, aren't they? One question I had was, you know, that senior management buy-in, because you know, some of these folks, poor folks in the room, have to go into their chief execs and say, look, this is I've been to a GDPR seminar from the BVRLA. There's some really important stuff. What's the thing that they need to be sort of saying? What's the buzzwords that they need to be saying, apart from the fines? Because that's said.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I suppose the fine bit is as I've said, is the stick, the bit that perhaps that's why it's there, and we've been through that. I suppose the spin on it that I've talked about, the fact that actually this is trying to assist the business in doing better business and in having better relationships with all of the different types of customer that you have. I suppose, you know, look, in terms of, it's not a great sell in that there's going to be a whole big project that needs to be undertaken, and you're going to need specialist expertise to give you that support. But I suppose, you know, it's a question of, I suppose one of the things I looked at was trying to do it across different areas within the business, as well as that.
Rather than tackle the top.
So, you know, every time you have a conversation with your procurement director, you know this is coming. This is going to be your impact. Specific examples is what they want to hear, rather than the theory around it. So little and often is what we've done.
It's a very good tip. And just the final question for me then, really, what do you think was, and you may have already answered the question, but worthwhile just making sure we understood it. What was the biggest area of challenge that you really underestimated?
I think we're still getting to grips with it, to be perfectly honest.
It's still kind of
I think you've got the amount, I think with a very established sort of business like ours, you've got a lot of historical build-up of systems, of policies, of all sorts of things. And what this is actually challenging you to do is to put everything in one place and work out if it still works, as well as saying you've also got to comply with all of these extra bits.
Were there any unintended benefits that you thought, actually, this is doing the business a good thing?
I think it will eventually show its benefits, and I think people are on board with what we're trying to do in a way that they understand it's going to bring us out to where we need to be across the industry. But I mean, I think there's an awareness of the amount of time and effort it's going to take for people to bring it through.
Good. Well, if you could join me, thank Kate. Thank you, Kate.